Hello, my little love bugs. It is I, your lovely and adorable host, Eva Webb. This is Titular Characters, and in this 69th issue, we're featuring Sierra Barnes. Sierra is a historian turned comics creator who currently lives in Washington, D.C., making comics based on history and folklore. She is particularly interested in the relationship between history, mythology, and memory. Her comics, including webcomic HANS Vogel is Dead, reflect this. When she's not making comics, you can usually find her haunting cafes and museums, like a very nerdy ghost. And today, we're going to talk to her about the unapologetic punk rock of webcomics. It is just a thrill to have you. I understand you have an exciting webcomic to talk about.
I sure do. My goodness. Exciting. Yes. My webcomic of 5 years, which is, some people have toddlers, and I have comics, as I'm sure many of us do, is going to be released through Cast Iron Books in September. Well, it's going to be kickstarted. It is a historical fantasy. I call it an anti-fascist fairy tale about a young German soldier who is shot down and killed toward the beginning of World War II and taken to a fairy tale afterlife where he has to unlearn fascism. So it's all about deconstructing fascist myths with Brothers Grimm fairy tales and sort of, coming to grips with your responsibility within a not great regime. So things that are unfortunately a bit relevant to today, I'm afraid.
It just feels ridiculous to me, just like unworldly weird, that you have to think about how Nazis might feel when you put out any piece of content. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when I was, because I had the concept for this comic in 2010, and everyone because I launched it in 2015, and everyone was like, "Oh, is this in response to Donald Trump?" And I have to be like, no, it's worse. I kind of had the idea in because I was finishing high school. Not to like date myself, I was finishing high school in 2010, and I was kind of like, well, Nazis are the ultimate bad guys, so like. Mm-hmm. Why would anyone become a Nazi? I'm gonna like talk about that, and 10 years later, my God, now I'm like, well, all right, I know why people are Nazis. Tragically, there's a lot of that going around.
I'm just amazed as a child of the 80s, to date myself, that the Nazis are actually political. When I was a kid, Wolfenstein was great and everything, but nobody saw it as a political statement. You had a million movies where like Indiana Jones would kill a Nazi, but like we had this idea that the Nazis were so far in the past that, they just weren't relevant anymore as far as like anything actually political.
Yeah.
And here we are in 2021.
I think that actually I think a lot about, I do a lot of junkie binge watching of like World War II media and how sort of the war trademark is portrayed, because I feel like, in some countries, the war, what does that mean? I think in America, the war will always be World War II just because of what a huge place it holds in American imagination. Sort of that was what was happening when Hollywood was really established and got rolling and really got money. I think that for a hot minute, Hollywood was just like, yeah, we used to slap some jackboots and an armband on someone and they're evil, baby. We don't need to talk about anything else. That's enough of a shortcut to establish them as a villain. But unfortunately, you go from the bad guy, the bad guys in Star Wars are always what I think about, the Empire, because they're little jodhpurs and their little jackboots, and they're very clearly space Nazis. But they seem to have come around, and they're just the aesthetic seems to be so cool that now people are like, well, yeah, they're space Nazis, but I could dress up like them on the weekends, and that's cool because they're not like real Nazis. And I think that sort of aesthetic sneak in has, to some extent, become a bit of a Trojan horse to allowing some other nastier things to get back into the political conversation, as it were. Not that I'm saying that, the 501st is responsible for the rise of fascism in America, but I do think that there's an interesting forgiveness of the aesthetic within Hollywood and within popular culture.
I think you're right about that. So about this book, why come up with that scenario?
Really, because I couldn't find a better way to attack fascism at the source. I knew sort of the protagonist had to be in it to get out of it. I like having it be, oh my gosh, okay. Sorry, I have a rescue rabbit who is getting into trouble behind me. The whole point of the story was to have somebody who started out with this sort of mindset, and he might not be sort of a true believer, evil guy trademark, but he's somebody who grew up in it and sort of swims in it. That's the ocean that he swims in, and finding out how to drain the water, so to speak. So having a naive American soldier who just came over with his priest buddy, his war daddy buddy. I don't know the other characters in Fury, but the other American war movie cutouts wasn't going to work for this. I think the story, on some levels, is about World War II, but I think the story is more about removing yourself from really an abusive situation, but an extremist situation, and what to do after that. Sort of a de-radicalization story.
Interesting. So, is there hope for Nazis, you think?
That's a question I don't know if I'm entirely qualified to answer. I think that certainly people can become de-radicalized, but I don't necessarily think that we should be immediately willing to forgive people who haven't done the work with open arms.
Sure.
I guess I think my point is that everyone can start doing the work, and that's really where the hope comes in. It's never too late to do the work. You can't really expect to go, well, I was a Nazi, but I've taken off the armband and now I'm good. So, yeah, that's not...
A lot of them tried to get away with that.
A lot of them will, I expect. We see that sort of in history. I think everyone's heard of Operation Paperclip by now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of men who died peacefully in their sleep who maybe shouldn't have. Maybe, if all things were narratively nicer. Sorry, this got really deep. But I think that I don't think that there's any sort of grand person or persons who can wave a magic wand and go, you're forgiven. But I think that anyone can start doing better.
So with this title, you wrote and drew it. Was there anyone else on your team?
I had a lot of friends that I would, flop around on their floors, moan hysterically.
Nice.
My significant other has done a lot of sitting there while I bounce ideas off of him, certainly.
That's awesome.
But I was doing sowing the wheat and weeping the wheat, so to speak.
What do you think was the most challenging piece of it
Oh man, like, um, I think the webcomics answers all of it. I mean, anyone who sort of reads or makes webcomics, you get the growth that's measured on the page, which is uh, it's cool to see. I love seeing how much everyone that I read grows, and I hate how much I look back on my old pages and see how kind of not as polished they are. But I think really the hardest thing is drawing airplanes.
Really, not horses?
Oh, I love drawing horses. That's my that's my zen place. Everyone complains about drawing horses, but I'm very glad to be at the point of the comic where I'm now drawing horses and not airplanes.
Most people have real trouble with horses for some reason. I think horses are adorable, though. You know?
They're great. I mean, I grew up around a lot of horses, so I guess that gives me an unfair advantage, perhaps.
Totally.
Use references. They're your friends.
Yeah. They definitely are. So, where do you find your zen? Is there an emotional place that you like to create from?
Yeah, I'm sort of learning that your brain is, speaking of horses, your brain is like a dumb little horse, and horses are very food motivated, and I think you got to find what your little dumb brain horse wants and then give it to your little dumb brain horse. So on every page I try and make sure that I have something that I want to get better at drawing and something that I like drawing. So I love drawing animals, so I will try and fit an animal on a page if I can.
Nice.
And I hate drawing transportation of any kind, so usually I will have like a horse-drawn wagon is my compromise of here's something I hate drawing and here's something I love drawing.
That's awesome. So, what's your origin story? How did you find and fall in love with comics?
I went to the College of William and Mary in beautiful Virginia and studied history and German studies like a good kid who thought she was going to go into diplomacy. And then I found a wonderful mentor with one of my professors who helped me with my honors thesis. And I was doing something, had some sort of drawing, showed him, always had a vague back in my head plan of I would love to do a webcomic someday, but that's not achievable. That's not something that respectable people do. And this professor was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool to do comics? You would do a cool comic. And I went, yeah, I would do a cool comic. And then I left to go do a Fulbright in Austria for a year and spent that entire time going, yeah, it would be cool to do a comic. I'm reading more comics and I'm drawing more and I'm thinking less about teaching and less about going back to school and less about working in DC and wearing a blazer. And the next thing I know, I'm pitching comics to any little indie collective that would have me. And here I am now.
That's amazing. It probably works out better this way, though, because blazers are dreadfully uncomfortable.
Right? Honestly. I don't have to work in a bra now, and that's a huge, really big advantage.
So, how do you make a story distinct and memorable?
Wow, that's a big question. I think, and this is like the cheesiest of advice, but I think it's also one of the hardest advices and pieces of advice to take, is to do things that you would enjoy reading. And I'm very glad that sort of when I started this comic, I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to make my weird little post-World War II allegory fairy tale history comic thing. And that's what I'm into, and I don't care what anyone else thinks. And then like 100 pages in, I was like, oh my God, what was I thinking? This is crazy. No one else is going to like this, but I was wrong, and that's quite nice. I think that really the key to making standout stories is to follow what makes you happy, and just go hog wild on it. Like there's always someone out there who's your flavor of weird, and they will be appreciative that you made your flavor of weird.
I like that.
And do it for those people. Yeah. I got a lovely comment on one of my pages about how I love using dialect, because when I was living in Austria, I lived in Upper Austria, which has a very unique dialect. It's called Mühlviertlisch, and it's like if you take German and then you just close your mouth and you replace every vowel with O. Very charming. Can't understand a word of it, but I put a bunch of it in my comic because I just think it's charming as hell. And someone commented on one of the pages that they appreciated that I had put Austrian dialect because their Oma was Austrian, and it inspired them to start learning German to speak with their Oma. And it was just such a lovely little comment that I was totally not expecting from my weird little comic. It's kept me going for a while, to be sure.
That's awesome.
You never know.
So do you draw fully digitally? Or do you have some sort of paper tablet hybrid setup, or how's it work?
Oh, digital life. It just makes everything so much easier. I do everything on my like janky copy of 2009 Adobe Photoshop. Like, it's not Photoshop, it's like Photoshop Elements. That's what it is that I got.
Wow.
Yeah.
The free one.
Yeah, with a tablet. Just been using that for a million years. I recently got an iPad with Procreate and was trying to do comics off of it, but it just was not working with a lot of my flow. So I'm back to my tablet and reliable, janky Photoshop Elements.
I still use Adobe Fireworks for like all kinds of web stuff. And they don't even make that one anymore. It was retired like back in, what was it, 2014, 2015, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mad respect.
And I'm holding on to it for dear life at this point because I don't think I'll be able to get it again.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I'm terrified of like knock on wood of if this laptop ever goes or I need to replace it. I don't know what I'm going to do because I'm pretty sure they won't let me import my elements anymore. I only have mad respect for people who do pen and ink comics, though. Y'all are the real ones. I'm not strong enough.
Well, even a lot of those guys are moving digital. Like, I know this one guy, he works at Marvel, and he is 100% digital now. And
it's so much easier.
As of today, he was trading his physical art for guitars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the big disadvantage of digital art, I will say, is that you don't get that satisfying, the originals. But one of my professors of grad school was like, yeah, you always want to do traditional because then you can sell your originals. And I was like, I'm not good enough with a pen. I don't think anyone would want to buy my originals.
A lot of people say that,
They'll just, I can always do a painting, I think that's okay.
Sure. Absolutely. So do you have a favorite type of story to tell?
I am a historian, so I always tend to lean toward sort of my areas of expertise. I almost always lean toward history just straight up, or historical fantasy, because history is just so wacky all the time. Just wild stuff happens with surprising regularity that I just think it's neat, and I think more people should know about it.
Totally. How do your characters find their voices?
Oh, man, I'm a big character-driven writer. I definitely have characters before I have most things, and I do a lot of I call them drabbles, which is where I just sort of sit and I just have random prompts that I do from the perspective of each of the characters. So I sit down and I'll go, okay, well, one prompt that I'll do is Hans gets locked at a burlesque show in 1923, and he's 8 years old or whatever. And what happens? And then I'll write that, and I'll go, okay, well, the Reineke, the other protagonist, she's being told she has to go on a tour of every boring new art museum in town, but at the end of it, she gets candy. So how does she handle doing what she doesn't want to do versus what she does want to do? And just do a million of those, which I love doing. I think doing that is much more fun than doing comics. So whenever I have a new character coming up, usually I'll just be knee deep in half sheets of paper that I've scrabbled insane things on. That I just,
That sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, it's like speed dating a little bit, but with yourself. You got to get at sort of the main, who are they is a complicated question. I think the better question is, what do they want and why can't they have it?
I like
sort of
that.
starting from there. Yeah. Because then you can start building all kinds of reasons why they don't get what they want.
Oh, sure. And there's your conflict right there.
And there you go, yeah.
Earlier, we were talking about you producing a book and having it kickstarted based on your comic.
Yes. My volume 1 of Hans Vogel is Dead is done, and it has been picked up by Cast Iron Books.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's run by Lizzie Kay, who is an absolute doll, and she is running the Kickstarter for it. Cast Iron is a brand new this year, I think, is when they launched their first book through Kickstarter, and mine will be, I think the current Kickstarter has another week or so, maybe 2 weeks. And mine will be starting in September 22nd, which is the comics anniversary as well. So easy to remember.
That's amazing. Yeah, that works out. So did you have to do a lot of sort of retreading over it to get it to fit in sort of a print format?
Oh, yeah. So I finished volume 1 last August, and I was possessed by this sudden desire to have a print copy in my hands by the anniversary. So I spent sort of 2 weeks feverishly reformatting all of the pages, because I just sort of picked a random page size dimension when I originally started doing pages in 2015, and all of the pages were in RGB, so I had to convert all of them to CMYK, and this is like a 280 page book. So I was reformatting, resizing all the pages. I had to redraw a few pages. So a bulk of the work had been done before I found out and then I just paid for a limited run of 50 hardcovers and sold those for the anniversary, which was nice too, mostly family and friends. But I heard back from the publisher in October that she wanted the book. And so her one stipulation was, she's like, I love it, 10 out of 10, big fan, hate the font. And I was like, cool. And a normal sane person would go, okay, here's some other fonts, what do you like? But I was like, what if I just hand lettered it? What if I just
went
back? and hand letter the whole thing. So I did that. And after 5 years of saying, I will never hand letter, I hate my handwriting, I can't, my wrist is already going. It's going to be so much work at this point. I sat down and spent probably like a month and a half relettering every page. And it does look so much better now. So I apologize to everyone along the way who was like, this is a terrible font choice. And I was like, whatever, you're a terrible font choice. But it was a terrible font choice. And it looks better. So
Awesome. You know, the way to cheat that would be to make your own font, you know, with your own hand letters.
I've tried, and it always, like, for whatever reason, I can never get the letter thickness right. I think I just need to pay someone to do it, but at this point, though, now I can, like, make all of the letters weird and funky as I handwrite them, so I can change all the sizes and stuff, and it turns out that hand lettering is actually a lot more fun. I have a lot of grudging enjoyment of it now.
Nice. Do you feel like it changes the experience of your comic?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It, somebody told me that, I think it was Mel Gilman told me that, your handwriting always looks better with your art because it's the same hand. And I was like, shh, okay, Mel, sure, that sounds great. And then I did it and I was like, ugh, they were right. They were right this whole time.
You know, it's funny. I talk to letterers all the time, and the stuff that they tell me that they have the most fun reading is all the people that do the actual hand lettering themselves.
I have only respect for letterers. You guys are the real ones, real MVPs. Doing this webcomic by myself before I really got into the comics community, I was like, people don't have opinions about letters. Letters are just there. And obviously I've yeah, you're laughing, yeah. That's I think that was the first real thing that I encountered when I started talking to other people who made comics, was people going like, oh, letters, letters, letters. And I was like, oh, you guys worry about letters? What, like, it's hard? It is hard. It's definitely hard. Oh no, I've learned the letter of my ways, the error of my ways to any letterers listening to this. Sorry.
Right on. So why was hand lettering like the first thing that popped into your mind as far as this is what I'm going to do to fix the font?
You know, I sort of saw the storm on the horizon with the font. I made a very unorthodox choice. I used a serif font and all lowercase letters because I thought that was really cool at the time. And it was 2015. You know, we all made mistakes. And I like stuck by my guns, and I had a lot of people over the years who are like, Sierra, this is, you know, they said it in varying degrees of niceness, but they're like, Sierra, this is pretty, this is not a great choice of fonts. And I was like, no, it's literary. You know, I don't like the superhero all caps and da 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 da, and I can't do it and whatever. So by the time sort of Lizzie was looking at the full manuscript and I was looking over it, I had already had a few editors who had told me, Sierra, your font is garbage. Please choose a different font. So I was primed to receive that, and Mel's words were sort of ringing in my ears. And so I did a mock-up of 8 pages with some pretty heavy dialogue. I don't actually like putting dialogue on pages. I'm very self-conscious about my lettering. I've always been very self-conscious about my lettering. So I try and avoid it. So I picked a scene with a lot of dialogue and I hand lettered that and submitted it and was like, wow, this does look a lot better, but we'll see what the editor says. And the editor was like, well, I love it. This is way better, but aren't you going to destroy your hand? And I was like, yeah, it's going to be worth it. It'll be fine. Sometimes you just get an idea in your head and you got to go with it.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, how do you approach representation and inclusion in your work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Research, it's all about the research. I sort of come from a background where that is Germany in this time period is my field of expertise. So I've been studying it for a long time, and I'm not German myself, but I speak German, and I have been over there. I lived in Austria for a bit, and I have mostly though I have people who are Austrian and German who can look over my work and go, yeah, that's great, and why would no, don't do that. Sensitivity readers are great, and doing your homework is great, and yeah, it seems very basic, but treating your subjects with respect and being aware that the story that you're telling may be someone's introduction to the people, the time period, etc., is something that I think creators should be responsible and conscious of. And I certainly am trying my best to do that in this work. But yeah, I spend a lot of time worrying about that, certainly.
Everyone who writes is doing some kind of world building, even if they're doing like autobiographical stuff. You know, they're always setting down a framework to tell their story in. But for you, where does it start?
Oh, yeah, that's I think I'm kind of cheating on this a little bit because half of the story takes place sort of in the protagonist's childhood and Hans's growing up in the real world in interwar Germany. So a lot of that is research. I get to be very lazy and not make anything up. I just get to read a lot, which is cool because there's a lot of just fun, wacky stuff going on in Weimar in this time period that I think everyone sort of skips over to get to the blood and gore bits. But I'm a big fan of the jazz and the degenerate art and the sex academies and stuff. I think that's I think that it's just a rad little time period and just kind of freaky little experiment in democracy. But I think on the fantasy side, I have like a whole TED talk I could go into on this. But really what I like to do is I like to think about the story as a photo, like a film still, where there's film coming in before it and there's film coming in after it. So you got to think about like everything in the world that is currently in your story, a whole line of technological, social, religious, spiritual, geological, everything lined up so that this could happen. So if your world has, my pet example is potatoes. If your world has potatoes, why does your world have potatoes in it? If you're building a fantasy Europe and you have potatoes in your world, does that imply colonialism? Because potatoes are, of course, from Peru, or modern day Peru, of course. So I spend a lot of time thinking about the minutia of the world, but also sort of how the minutia reflects the macro of what is currency, what is valuable. Does your world even have currency? If I'm sort of half basing the fairy tale world off of Napoleonic Germany and Austria because that was the time period of the Brothers Grimm. But I'm trying to do so in a way of like maintaining. I bring up the potatoes thing because I'm trying to sort of retroactively imagine a fairy tale pre-colonial Germany. So there are no potatoes in the fairy tale world of Hans Vogel. There are, frankly, not a lot of vegetables native to Europe, or that were being cooked in Europe in that time period, which is very depressing. I get to draw a lot of cabbage this chapter, on carrots. cabbage and carrots. But I think a lot about continuity, sort of more along your lines, and world building is as much a rabbit hole as it is realizing that you are only taking one film still out of your long movie of world building. And you want to have thought about why everything is in your movie still. But you don't need to tell everyone every aspect of it, as much as I would love to tell everyone that there are no potatoes here and why there are no potatoes. That's just for me to know, and for poor people who ask me on podcasts to find out.
And anybody who listens, like, the fans of your webcomic now know that there aren't any potatoes.
Exactly. You can look. You won't find a potato. All the vodka is grain vodka. That's
interesting.
Obsessive. And that's mostly because my background is history and studying history. I'm sure that if I were a geologist, I would be coming at this completely differently. So I think my pro advice is to world building, play to your strengths. I know that history is certainly one of mine, so I'm like, why, yes, I do happen to know why this coinage looks this way.
Nice.
Why won't anyone ask me?
Yeah, I know exactly what that's like. You just want to go back and say, God, I made this so obvious. Come on, guys.
I feel like it's 50%, if you put something in, you're like, oh gosh, yeah, everyone's going to pick up on this. This is very clear and nobody gets it. And 50% you sneaking something in and then everyone going like, oh, hey, wow, there's this thing that's very clear and obvious. And you're like, oh, okay. Very cool.
Right on. All right. Are you ready for the active fan questions?
Oh, yeah. Always.
Excellent. Okay, so what are you reading right now?
Oh, what aren't I reading right now? I've been trying to get back into prose. So I bought the latest book by Susanna Clarke Piranesi.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved Jonathan Strange and Mr. Gnarl, so I was very excited. And then, of course, I haven't read it. I've only been reading comics. So I'm currently reading this gorgeously illustrated, graphic canon of children's literature, which is just a whole bunch of cartoonists illustrating different children's stories from around the world, which I got at my local library.
That sounds like fun.
And it's delightful. It is. It's a lot of fun. There's some seriously gorgeous paper cuts that people that some artists did for the Firebird, and I'm just drooling over them. They're just absolutely beautiful.
Do you have a favorite story of all time?
Oh, like a fairy tale?
Or a comic?
Or a comic. Oh boy, it's hard to pick one.
I know I'm asking you to pick your babies.
Yeah, geez. I think well, I think I have to give a shout out to the legend, Tom Siddell's Gunnerkrigg Court, because that was God, it's got to be 12, 15 years old at this point. I remember reading it in high school, and that was one of the comics that I was like, oh, I want to make comics someday like this. And it's still going. I mean, I don't understand how he can update 3 days a week. It's just an absolute icon. What a legend. I love Jason Lutz Berlin. I think that's a must read for anyone who's interested in the time period, and his inks are I just want to just meld them into my brain forever. Yeah, Nononba by Shigeru Mizuki was, I think that was the last book that made me cry. I don't know if that was one of the questions.
Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah, I read that when are you familiar with the work?
No, I'm not.
It's about Mizuki sort of growing up in rural Japan, and he meets the sort of grandmother figure, Nononba, who teaches him about yokai, and sort of growing up in this pre-war time period and becoming engaged with folklore at a young age. That sort of becomes his later, one of his passions later. And I was reading it when my grandmother was dying a few years ago, so it really struck a chord with me. And it's just a very sweet, very charming book, very emotional.
Nice. Is there anyone that stands out in your mind as either the most underappreciated or inspiring creator in comics?
Everyone who does webcomics, honestly. There's so many great webcomics out there that I think deserve so much love. Just off the top of my head, some of my favorite webcomics are by Blomen, which is about the tulip financial crisis in the Netherlands during I believe it was the 16th century, which is just a hoot. The beautiful, stunning black and white art. The Carpet Merchant of Constantinople, and by Romani Yi, and Yi's latest work, which is called Alexander the Servant and the Water of Life, which is about Alexander the Great, that she just started. Incredible, just absolutely gorgeous works, incredible works. I'm a huge fan of everything she does. My gosh, yeah, Gunnar Craig Court, I've already mentioned. There's just, honestly, if you go looking through, Tiger, and of course the artist is escaping me right now. There's just so many good webcomics out there. It's crazy. Every day there's just getting better.
I was really impressed. I hadn't looked at webcomics for years and years, and the early ones I looked at, it didn't really move me. But I went back like this year, and I just got sucked into like 10 of them.
They're so funky, because I think that they got, when I was younger and started reading them, they had sort of a vulgar reputation. They were kind of like, oh, well, they're people who aren't good enough to be published. And I thought that's pretty punk. And it still is pretty punk. I think that I don't think that applies at all. I think that certainly there are a lot of newbies to the industry, but I think that it's not only a great way for people to get into reading comics, because there's no barrier to entry. You don't have to pay. You can read them for free online. Which is pretty rad, but also they're a great low barrier to entry to making comics. There's, it's very low pressure. You can make your own website, and if you don't want to do that, there's now hosting sites, and you can go through Tapas or Webtoons or I don't know, any of the whatever the kids are using these days. It's been such a joy to watch the medium really explode, and
That's
not
awesome.
only on the creator side, but also sort of seeing it get some love from the industry side as well. We're getting a lot of shout out to Iron Circus and Hiveworks, who are doing great work promoting webcomic creators. Hiveworks, I think, is webcomics specific.
Some fascist was making an argument about how American comics are failing, and then they brought up Webtoon. So I went to Webtoon to look up their most popular categories, and it turns out that it's fantasy and romance.
Yes.
Which, oddly enough, isn't the kind of thing a fascist would like to read. So I let him know that. Dead silence. Didn't say anything. In fact, I tried to bring it up with 2 or 3 other guys like that. Nope, they just don't want to talk about it. So I'm not sure why they're bringing that up in the first place, There's this weird, because I think the
there's some article by some butthurt Comicsgate guy about I'm sorry, a guy who is complaining about Demon Slayer outselling American comics, which I mean doesn't make any sense. Like that's just not a statement that makes sense on any level. But the argument, as I understood it, was that Japanese comics are succeeding and American comics are failing because American comics are just too SJW, I guess.
Oh, I know. It's so silly.
Which is great because it told me, one, you didn't read Demon Slayer, and two, you don't read American comics. So why are you writing an article on this?
Well, we sort of call them in the circles I hang out with. We've sort of started calling them culture war tourists. They want to talk about everything, but they don't actually want to put in the effort to do anything but complain, and it really shows.
You know, like the one of the things consistent with fascists throughout the ages is that they are primarily afraid of art, and they're delightfully consistent on that one. I mean, they're consistent on a few tragic issues, but they're certainly afraid of art and what it can be. And there's really not a lot of enduring fascist art, and there never will be because it is a creatively bankrupt ideology. And I think that in a lot of ways, zines and indie comics and webcomics are an antithesis to it because anyone can do it. And I think everyone should do it. Just go out there, make a comic, staple a little 4-page zine together, write your feelings on it. I think it's rad.
That's awesome. I wish more people would, you know. The barrier to entry has been completely blown away, you know.
There's nothing, you know, and everyone who's like, oh, I can't draw, like, whatever. You never stop thinking that. I can't draw. Just do it anyway. Or, you know what, just write your feelings. It's fine. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to draw anything.
That is awesome. Well, Sierra, I have really, really enjoyed this one. And it looks like we're up against the end of the show. Are you ready for the fun part?
Oh, heck yeah.
Nice. All right, so we'll start with an easy one. What's your favorite food?
That's the easy one? I'm going to say sushi. So that's what I had tonight.
Good call. Good call. Would you say you're a cat person or a dog person?
I'm a rabbit person, actually.
Really?
I just adopted my first bunny 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Are you the sort of person that would adopt a chicken and give it a proper name?
I already have.
Nice.
I had 8 chickens growing up, and I gave them all names.
That is amazing. What's the most expressive use of profanity that you've ever seen?
Oh, goodness.
Something memorable.
Oh, man. You're going to have to come... I'm totally drawing a blank. So I think a well-placed fuck is really its own reward. You know, sometimes simplest is best, less is more.
This is true.
It's all about the delivery.
Yeah. I'm never going to get people to say anything but fuck there, so it all works out.
I was a big fan of bastard in my youth. I like to draw out the bastard for some reason, like I was some sort of sheep. Yeah. So I guess I could go with that one. Still a fave. Still has a warm place in my heart, for sure.
Right on. So, what inspires you?
Oh, reading good nonfiction really inspires me. I love just like reading something zany in history. Like the other day, I was reading about women's boxing in the late 1700s and how they would post advertisements in newspapers calling each other just the most horrendous names. They're like, "You're a pox-ridden whore. Come fight me tomorrow night." And I think that's rad as hell. Like immediately, I was like, "Absolutely, I need to go draw something about that." 100%.
Nice. That's a great thing to call somebody. Like you, that would be so anachronistic. Yeah.
Can I put that as my favorite use of an obscenity.
Pox-ridden horror? Yeah, you get it.
Yeah, come find me tomorrow night. Yeah.
There you go. All right, so where do you find joy?
Oh, well, I've been finding a lot of joy in Kokachin, my bunny, recently. She's she's very outgoing. She enjoys demanding pets and treats and licking the back of my head, which is a very unnerving experience, but very fun. I love doing martial arts. I'm part of a karate dojo, and there's, just working out. There's nothing like it. Go out there, just punch the air. Makes you feel better.
Totally. All right, so you have just defeated Thanos. Congratulations. You are now in possession of the Infinity Gauntlet, and you have the ability to bend reality to your whim. What's the first thing you did with it?
Oh, man. I think, I'm probably going to end capitalism.
Awesome.
Yeah. Universal base income, wealth equality, that kind of thing.
I like it.
And maybe some sushi.
Ooh, sushi's good.
Yeah.
So there's never a wrong time or place for sushi, just in general.
There really isn't. It's just, I spent so much of my life afraid to eat fish, and now I feel like I'm playing catch up on all the sushi I could have had when I was younger.
I totally understand that one. So what's next for the talented Sierra Bravo?
Oh, you're so kind. Yeah, well, I'm working on pages for volume 2. There's 3 volumes in HANS Vogel, so I'm hoping to get updates started again in September. Working on pages for that. I have like a dream project that I'm talking with my agent about. That would be very cool if it came through, but I can't say a lot about that. Wink,
Fingers
wink.
crossed.
But yeah, mostly just getting back to that webcomic life. I would love a buffer. That would be amazing. I've heard it's a great time.
Nice. All right, and where can people find you online?
People can find me online at sierrabravoart.com. I'm on Twitter as, frankly, an unspellable thing that makes sense in Russian, but not in English. But if you search Sierra Bravo, I should show up. And I'm on Instagram as Sierra Bravo Art, with underscores between all of them. I should really just change my Twitter name, but now I'm nostalgic about it.
And now it's time to close the show. Imagine it. The lights beginning to come on in an empty theater. People starting to get up from their seats. The smell of popcorn crushed on the floor. And the thought runs through your head that Titular Characters is awesome, and you want to support it. Fear not, my friends. There are tons of ways to do it. You can follow Eva at Eva is Adorable on Twitter. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Castbox, or Podcast Addict. And if you're feeling super generous, you can leave some dough at buymeacoffee.com/Eva is Adorable. There, you can contribute as little as $1. And every bit goes towards paying for production and hosting of this show. How cool is that? Titular Characters is a show about the things we love. It is produced and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. Opening theme by Antonia Marquis. Closing theme by Mikey Flash of Speed Force Music. The dreamy announcer guy who reads the credits is Donnie Underwood. That's me. Join us next time for another death-defying adventure in cyberspace. See you then!